Found out my wife of 5 years is cheating. Now she's making excuses and begging for a second chance. I'm a 34-year-old lawyer, and my wife Wendy, who's 32, has been the center of my world, or at least she was until recently. We met 7 years ago through mutual friends. She was charming, bright, and had an energy about her that drew people in. For 2 years, we dated, and everything felt perfect. She was a private school teacher then, passionate about shaping young minds. I was just wrapping up law school, grinding through exams and internships. 2 years into dating, I proposed. It felt like the natural next step. She was my best friend, my partner, the person I saw myself building a life with. We got married 5 years ago, and while marriage hasn't been without its challenges, I thought we were solid. When we got married, Wendy decided to quit her teaching job to go back to school for her master's in education. I supported her decision wholeheartedly, even though it put a strain on our finances. I was fresh out of law school, buried under a mountain of student loans, and trying to make a name for myself at a prestigious but demanding law firm. The first 2 years of our marriage were tough. I worked 60-hour weeks, often coming home exhausted. There were nights when I barely had the energy to eat dinner, let alone engage in meaningful conversations. Wendy reassured me that she understood, that this was a temporary phase, and that my hard work would pay off. She was right eventually, it did. I'm now financially secure, my loans are nearly paid off, and my career is thriving. Wendy, meanwhile, pursued her dreams. After completing her master's, she enrolled in a doctoral program in education. She worked part-time to contribute to our household, and I was proud of her ambition. I thought we were happy. But a few days ago, everything changed. It started innocently enough. While cleaning out a closet, I found Wendy's old laptop. She'd mentioned years ago that it had crashed and was unusable. It was dusty and tucked away in a box, seemingly forgotten. I almost didn't bother with it, but a thought struck me. Wendy loved taking pictures back then, especially of us together. I wondered if the laptop might hold some photos from the early days of our relationship. I thought it'd be a sweet surprise recovering those photos and showing them to her. Maybe we'd laugh and reminisce about those simpler times. The laptop wouldn't power on, so I removed the hard drive and connected it to my PC using a SATA cable. The drive came to life, and soon I was scrolling through folders filled with images. At first, it was exactly what I'd hoped for. Snapshots of us at the beach, at dinners, at friends' weddings. Wendy looked radiant in every photo, and seeing those moments brought a smile to my face. But then, as I kept scrolling, I noticed something strange. There were photos of Wendy with someone else, a man I recognized as her ex-boyfriend, Bob. Initially, I wasn't alarmed. These could have been old pictures, taken before we met. But as I examined them more closely, a sickening realization dawned on me. In some of the photos, Wendy was wearing a necklace, a heart-shaped locket that I had given her during our second year of dating. I'd saved for weeks and even borrowed money from my brother to afford it. Seeing her wearing it while cuddling and kissing Bob made my stomach churn. I checked the timestamps on the photos, hoping against hope that there was some kind of mistake. But there wasn't. The dates didn't lie. It became clear that during the times Wendy had told me she was visiting her mom or her sister, giving me space to study for exams, she had been meeting up with Bob. While I was working tirelessly to build our future, she had been betraying me. The anger came first. It was white hot, consuming me like fire ants crawling under my skin. My head pounded, and my chest felt like it was going to burst. I wanted to scream, to punch something, to lash out at the world for this unimaginable betrayal. But then, just as quickly as the anger came, it vanished. A cold numbness settled over me. My emotions shut down completely, and my mind became eerily calm. I started thinking like a lawyer, analyzing the situation in a detached, methodical way. I copied all the photos onto a flash drive, not just the ones of Wendy and Bob, but every single image on the hard drive. I wanted to have evidence, though I wasn't entirely sure why. Maybe it was for closure, or maybe it was to confront her. After packing a bag and grabbing a few suits, I left our apartment. Before I walked out, I connected Wendy's hard drive back to the laptop and left it open on the desk. I checked into a hotel that night. The room was small and sterile, but it felt like a sanctuary. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the flash drive in my hand. A part of me wanted to smash it, to destroy every trace of the betrayal I'd uncovered. But another part of me, the part that's always been rational, logical, knew I couldn't. The next morning, I went to work as if nothing had happened. My colleagues didn't notice anything unusual. I laughed at their jokes, participated in meetings, and even stayed late to review a client's case. It felt surreal, like I was living someone else's life. But every time I had a moment to myself, the numbness returned. It wasn't sadness or even anger anymore. It was emptiness. I couldn't feel anything, and that terrified me. Wendy had been the love of my life, the person I'd built my future around. And now she felt like a stranger. That evening, I decided to confront her. Not because I wanted answers, I already had them, but because I needed to say my piece. When I walked into our apartment, Wendy was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She looked up and smiled when she saw me, but her smile faltered when she noticed the expression on my face. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. I didn't say anything. Instead, I walked over to the desk and picked up the laptop. I turned it so she could see the screen. Her face went pale. How did you?" she stammered. "It doesn't matter," I said, my voice cold and steady. "I found it. I know." Wendy's eyes filled with tears. I can explain." "Can you?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Because from where I'm standing, it seems pretty straightforward. You cheated on me. Repeatedly. While I was working my ass off to build a life for us." She started sobbing, her words tumbling out in a frantic, incoherent stream. She said she'd been young and stupid, that she'd made a mistake, that she hadn't known how to end things with Bob. She begged me to forgive her, to give her a chance to make things right. But as I stood there, listening to her pleas, I realized something. I didn't care. Her words didn't move me. Her tears didn't hurt me. I felt nothing. And that terrified me. I told Wendy I needed time to think and left the apartment again. As I walked through the city streets, I couldn't shake the emptiness that had settled in my chest. I knew I should feel something: anger, sadness, betrayal. But all I felt was a hollow void where my love for Wendy used to be. Over the next few days, I threw myself into work. I avoided Wendy's calls and texts, unsure of what to say to her. Part of me wanted to end things immediately, to file for divorce and never look back. But another part of me, the part that had spent 7 years building a life with her, hesitated. I started seeing a therapist, hoping they could help me make sense of my feelings or lack thereof. During our first session, I confessed that I was more scared of my numbness than of Wendy's betrayal. "It's a defense mechanism," the therapist explained. Your mind is trying to protect you from the full weight of the pain. In time, those emotions will surface. When they do, it'll be important to process them rather than bury them. I'm still waiting for that to happen. For now, I'm taking it one day at a time. I've started making plans for the future, a future that, for the first time in years, doesn't include Wendy. I don't know what's next for me, but I do know one thing. I refuse to let this define me. Wendy may have shattered my trust, but she hasn't shattered me. And when the numbness finally fades, I'll be ready to face whatever comes next. On the screen was a picture of her kissing Bob, with the locket visible around her neck. Next to the laptop, I placed a sticky note with an arrow pointing to the locket. The message was simple, but unmistakable. I knew everything. I drove across town to my brother's house. He's always been my rock, the one person I can count on when things go south. I didn't need to explain much. He didn't ask many questions. Instead, he handed me a cold beer, patted me on the shoulder, and let me crash on his couch. Sometimes, words aren't necessary. The silence between us felt like the only comfort I could rely on. The calls started a few hours later. Wendy had apparently gone to her mom's house earlier that day or so, she claimed, and when she returned to our apartment, she saw the photo on the screen. The voicemails came first, frantic and tearful. Then the texts followed, long, rambling messages filled with apologies, explanations, and promises to make things right. I didn't respond. I didn't even listen to the voicemails. I just watched the notifications pile up and felt nothing. The next morning, I woke up early and made a call to an associate in my firm's family law department. My voice was steady as I explained the situation and asked for advice on separation and divorce. We don't have kids or shared property, so the process should be straightforward. Most of our money has gone toward my student loans and her tuition, so there isn't much to divide. It's a clean break, at least on paper. Wendy, meanwhile, was relentless. She tried calling my brother's phone when I wouldn't pick up mine. She even showed up at his house, but he shut her down over the intercom, warning her not to come any closer unless she wanted to meet his Dobermans. According to him, she was sobbing and begging, her voice cracking with desperation. But I felt nothing. No pity, no anger, no sadness. Just emptiness. And that's what scares me the most. I feel absolutely nothing for her. No sadness, no anger, no longing for reconciliation. It's like a switch has been flipped, and every ounce of love or attachment I had for Wendy is just gone. 2 days have passed since I discovered her betrayal, and this numbness hasn't faded. Strangely, I'm functioning better at work than I have in months. My mind is sharper, my focus laser-like. I've been knocking out tasks that had been lingering on my to-do list for weeks. But when it comes to my personal life, I feel like an empty shell. I'm going through the motions, but there's no spark, no fire. I've spent hours replaying our relationship in my head, trying to make sense of it all. Were there signs I missed? Red flags I ignored? Wendy always seemed so devoted, so supportive. Was it all an act? The way she looked at me, the way she cheered me on during my toughest days, was any of it real? I keep coming back to one question. How could she do this to me? I sacrificed so much for her, for us. I worked grueling hours, put my dreams on hold, and supported her through her academic pursuits. I believed in her, in us. And yet, she chose to betray me. The locket, the one I had given her as a symbol of our love, became a cruel reminder of her infidelity. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry, it was a lie she wore around her neck. People say that love and hate are two sides of the same coin. But what happens when the coin disappears entirely? Am I still in shock? Is this emotional numbness a defense mechanism, or is it permanent? Have I been so thoroughly betrayed that I've become incapable of feeling anything for her or anyone? These questions keep me up at night, though they don't haunt me in the way you might expect. It's more like an intellectual puzzle, something to be solved rather than felt. The one thing I do know is that my marriage is over. There's no coming back from this, no forgiveness, no second chances. Wendy made her choice, and now I'm making mine. I refuse to live in a relationship built on lies and deceit. If there's a silver lining to all of this, it's that I've gained clarity. I see things as they are, not as I want them to be. I've always prided myself on my rationality, and now it feels like that's all I have left. Emotions are messy, unpredictable. Logic, on the other hand, is clean and reliable. But there's a part of me, a small, hidden part, that wonders if I'll ever feel love again. Not for Wendy, but for anyone. Has this experience hardened me to the point of no return? Will I always keep people at arm's length, afraid to let them in for fear of being hurt again? For now, I'm focusing on moving forward. The paperwork is in progress, and I've started looking for a new place to live. My brother has been a godsend, offering me a place to stay until I get back on my feet. He's even been researching apartments for me, sending me listings and encouraging me to see this as a fresh start. His optimism is contagious, even if I'm not quite ready to share it. Over the past few days, I've found solace in small routines. Morning coffee on my brother's porch, the crisp autumn air filling my lungs. Evening runs around the neighborhood, my playlist drowning out the noise in my head. These moments of peace remind me that life goes on, even when it feels like your world is falling apart. Long story short, I found out that my wife was cheating on me with her ex-boyfriend during the early days of our relationship. Now I feel absolutely nothing for her, and I don't know if that's a blessing or a curse. But one thing is certain, I'll never allow myself to be blindsided like this again. As I sit here, staring at the divorce papers on the table in front of me, I'm struck by the finality of it all. This chapter of my life is closing, and a new one is beginning. It's terrifying and exhilarating all at once. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know this. I'm stronger than I thought I was. I'm capable of surviving heartbreak and betrayal, and I'm ready to rebuild my life, piece by piece.